Vanakkam. Hello friends. In the past 50 or so episodes, we have seen the evolution of the political history of ancient Tamilagam from the creation of surplus economies to the rise of the chieftancies, which eventually saw the emergence of the three great monarchies, the Cheras, the Cholas and the Pandyas. We have traced the lineage of 10 rulers of each of these dynasties, starting roughly from a period of around 300 BCE, ending 200 Common Era, a period of about 500 years. The Sangam literary works being the main source of history of this period, the Pattu Pattu and Ettu Togai anthologies together with the Tolhapiyam capture a picture of the socio-economic and political history of this early period. In his The Chronology of the Early Tamils, K.N. Sivarajapillai has done a remarkable job in data mining the Sangam works and giving us a synchronistic table of these rulers. Well, several historians and Tamil scholars have tried to recreate the genealogy of the triumvirate and have given varying chronological order of kings that do not necessarily tally with the table given by KNS. The problem here is the very dating of the Tolgapiyam and the Sangam literary works, which was a subject of controversy. KNS himself dates the Tolgapiyam as a post-Sangam work, claiming that it should have been composed after the period of the Pattu Pattu and Ettu Togai works. While the great Tamil scholar Vaiyaburi Pillai dated the Sangam works to between 3rd century and 5th century Common Era, in his noted work, The History of South India, first published in the year 1947, K.A. Neelakanta Sastri, the renowned historian, dates all the Sangam works post 5th century Common Era, and he has the audacity to claim that everything of value recorded therein was brought about by an admixture of Vedic culture and Sanskrit literature that had permeated the Tamil country from the beginning of the Common Era or a little earlier. In her introduction to the 4th edition of this work, the renowned contemporary historian Dr. Champaka Lakshmi has rightfully pulled up Neelakanta Sastri for this biased view, and I quote, "Sastri brought to bear upon his works his knowledge of both Sanskrit and regional languages, particularly Tamil, a rare expertise among historians, although his predilections towards Sanskrit far outweighed the importance he assigned to the vernacular while assessing their value for regional histories. In fact, he believed that without the influence of Sanskrit, no language of the Dravidian family could have developed its rich literary tradition and culture." Close quotation. Well, the scholars up to early 20th century were not privy to many of the archaeological finds that have been happening over the past century, and with all due respect to them, today, the dating of the Tolgapiyam and the Sangam literary works are better understood by the archaeological evidences that are being unearthed in different sites across Tamilagam, corroborating with many facts recorded in the Sangam literary works, testifying to their authenticity. We also have the written accounts left behind by foreign travelers and chroniclers that provide a sheet anchor for fixing the time period of the Sangam works. As a recap, if we were to see just one example, the case of the famed Chera port of Musiri, we saw earlier of how Dr. Cherian, the lead director of Project Musiris, took the aid of a Sangam poem to determine that the port city unearthed in Pattanam in the Ernakulam district of Kerala was indeed the ancient port of Musiri. The excavations that were started in the year 2004 revealed a port site located on the shores at a place where the sea was very shallow. That meant that huge ships could not have been anchored there. The Sangam poet Paranar precisely captures this in a Purananuru poem of how indeed the seas were shallow near the shores of Port Musiri, whereby huge ships that brought material had to anchor deep out in the sea, and smaller vessels had to ply and help transfer the materials to the shore. In the Purananuru poem 343, he records, Kalam tanda porparisam Kadithoniyal Kare Serkundu. Gold wares from ships are brought to the shore on smaller boats through the backwaters, while the Greek scholar Pliny the Elder and the chronicles of an unnamed Greek sailor, the Periplus of the Erythraean, both record the famed port of Musiri, their time period being the 1st century Common Era. They claim that Musiri was a major emporium in the ancient spice trade network. Paranar continues, Manai Kuvaiya Kari Mudayal Kalichummaya Karai Kalakkurundu, recording the black pepper sacks that lay heaped in the warehouses near the shore, thereby attesting to the brisk trade center that was located at Musiri. With the help of paleobotanic findings and other evidence, Dr. Cherian and his team have given an early history dating of 1st century BCE for the port town of Musiri, undoubtedly anchoring the early dating of the Sangam works. In the recent Keeladi excavations in 2017, the finding of an ivory dice was cause for great excitement. The dice tallied with a passing reference made by the poet Nallanduvanar in the Neidal Kali of Kalitohai. Neidal Kali, recording scenes from the littoral region, Nallanduvanar sings, Muttu ural manal yekkar alitakkal, munnayam pattu uruvan petravan manam pola. When you united with her on the shore with pearl-like sand, she was in bliss like a man who got number 10 rolling dice while gambling. Interestingly, in the whole of this poem, Nallanduvana uses similes from gambling with dice to capture the emotions of a hero and heroine. Now, two factors are of interest to us. At the Keeladi excavation, cuboid-shaped ivory dice have been recovered, and it is akin to the dice that we use in our board games today. It is only in the cuboid shape that you get the number 10, unlike the Dayakatta, which is very popular as well from ancient days in this part of the country. Well, a society has to be at an advanced stage for its people to enjoy leisure activities like gambling, and then to have used dice made of ivory, they must have been a very affluent society as well. Even more interesting is the fact that similar such dice made of clay or terracotta have also been unearthed, proving that people of a lesser social strata also enjoyed leisure time, presenting a picture of an equitable society. More interestingly, the dice unearthed at Keeladi are very similar to the dice found in ancient Harappan excavations. Are they markers of a continuing civilization? We know now that the pottery markings at Keeladi have been dated to 6th century before Common Era by archaeologists, and more recently archaeologist K. Rajan has given a dating for the Tamil Brahmi on potsherds as 685 BCE based on 73 AMS datings given by the Beta Analytic Lab of Florida, thereby establishing that Brahmi writing existed in the Tamil country way before the period of Emperor Ashoka or even the birth of Jainism and Buddhism. There are innumerable such markers in the Sangam literary works revealing an advanced culture that put townships like Keeladi on par with the Mahajanapadas of northern India, the city culture that flourished during the 6th century before Common Era. These are indications that there must have been kingship regulating production and trade. A very interesting word describing wealthy merchants in a Puram poem goes, Mannar Pinnor, showing how they were regarded next to the king in the social hierarchy. Again, as a marker of a well-developed society, we have seen how Sangam kings levied taxes on the production and the existence of toll roads where the king's soldiers protected the Vanihachatu, the trade caravans that travelled along the ancient trade routes. In the Malai Padukadam, a few verses reveal how these roads even had name boards and direction pointers. In another poem, there is an interesting word, Aratturai Ambi, for which the Tamil scholar Vidwan Vellai Varananar gives a very beautiful meaning in his book, The Sangagala Tamil Makkal, as Dharma Vodam, meaning that they were operating a free boat service for the poorer people, much akin to the pink buses that ply today for women in Tamil Nadu. It can only be inferred that such an advanced society must have had able rulers at the helm, at least from the 6th century before Common Era, but unfortunately, nothing so far has emerged from the excavation sites that reveal details of the kingship of that time. It is ironical that Tamil kings who patronized the Sangam poets did not deem it necessary to record details of their rule the way Emperor Ashoka did. In this background, the synchronistic tables so painstakingly pieced together by K.N. Sivaraja Pillai is bound to have controversies. Nevertheless, in keeping to these tables, we have seen the rule of 42 sovereigns representing the lines of the three great monarchies. We have also covered the history of several prominent chieftains of the Sangam period, their history intertwined with that of the Movendar. From around 250 Common Era, the rule of the Movendar seemed to have weakened. With the lack of the names of the powerful Movendar captured in Sangam poetry, the synchronistic tables comes to an abrupt end. Keynes points out how no more formidable rulers are named towards the end of the 3rd century Common Era. What follows, on the other hand, are works in praise of the chieftains, like the Kadayelu Vallalgal, followed by Kumanan and Nalliyakodan, about which we have just seen in the previous episodes. But then, after a few decades, there are no heroic compositions on any chieftains either. We see a complete gap, a void in praise poetry. So, what could have happened? In his insightful paper for the social sciences, the noted historian Rajan Gurukal has pointed out how there is no direct evidence for a total crisis leading to the dissolution of the Tamil heroic society. He says, and I quote, "But a disjunction is explicit in the sources, both archaeological and literary, which in terms of their existing chronology and historical context would have us believe that the principal ruling chiefdoms went into oblivion by the close of the 3rd century Common Era. None of the heroic poems has sung the exploits of a chieftain belonging to the period after the 3rd century Common Era, nor have the historians clearly identified any chieftain of the well-known chiefdoms reigning during that period." Historians from KNS to Mailai Vengadasamy to K.A. Neelakanta Sastri himself all opine that one of the major reasons for the gradual decline in the power of the Great Three were the continuous internecine warfares that were happening in the Tamil country. The ruthless ambition of the Movendar to vanquish the chieftains and expand their territories should have taken its toll on the economy of the state, thereby leaving them weak and exposed. In her book on the history of the Kalabras, Dr. Padmavati, a senior epigraphist with the Tamil Nadu Archaeological Department, has given a very insightful conjecture that one of the other major reasons for the weakening of the Movendar should have been caused by the chieftains withdrawing their support to the kings. We have seen how these chieftains had always wielded political power, though they were smaller players in the overall political scenario. Their support was very crucial for the monarchies to thrive, just like how today a big ruling party could be toppled by a small party in a coalition by withdrawing its support. The chieftains seem to have run populist governments and were more in touch with the grassroots compared to the Movendar, who seem to have become autocratic over a period of time. If one goes by the sentiment expressed by Sangam poets, the chieftains seem to have been loved by the common people, while the Movendar were feared. By trying to overpower the chieftains, the Movendar may have lost popularity with their own subjects. Now, we have also seen how Sangam poets were very close to the kings, not just rendering praise poetry, but also acting as their advisors and confidants, with some of them having such a close relationship with the patron king as to be willing to give up their very own life, as did Pisrandayar. Beginning from the Common Era or a little earlier, there was a gradual inflow of a new breed of scholars into the Tamil country, the Vedic priesthood from the north. They brought in a new language, Sanskrit, new rituals such as the Homa ritual, the fire sacrifices, and new social norms, as in social stratifications based on caste division, and even a new political ideology, as in glorifying war and encouraging aggression, eventually creating new gods appropriating the existing gods of the Dravidian people. Not that ancient Tamilagam had not seen war. It was through the mechanism of war that the great three rose to power, and the flow of ideas in the Sangam poems shows an evolution from anarchy to monarchy. So war was essential, but we have seen both inscriptional and literary evidence that shows that the Moovendar for a long time had a very amicable relationship. We have seen in a much earlier episode about the Hathikumba inscriptions of Karavela that showed how the Chera Chola Pandyas seem to have had a coalition that lasted for 113 years, protecting the northern boundary of Tamilagam from infiltration, and of how poets like Avvayar rejoiced seeing the great three seated in unison at court, fearing that their unity may be disrupted by alien forces. Differences in ideology brought in by these alien forces could be cited as one of the main reasons for the political chaos that descended on ancient Tamilagam. An ideological chasm rose in the realm of religion, an area that had hitherto no great importance in the Sangam Age. Dr. Cherian records of how two factors amazed him during the excavations at Musiris: the absence of religious relics of any kind in the thousands of artifacts that were dug up, and also markedly absent were large weapon hoards. The Tamil people were by and large a peaceful and egalitarian society who lived by the dictum given by one of their great poets, Kaniyan Pungundranar, Yadum Ure, Yavarum Kelir. All land was one, and all people were related. The Tamil people did not attach too much importance to religious rituals, and the faith that they followed was more of a native cult revolving around animism and the worship of ancestral spirits. We see an underlying unity of practice across all ancient cultures of the world in nature worship and spirit worship, which we will take up in detail in a separate episode. Buddhism and Jainism were the first proper structured religions on Indian soil. They evolved in the north with doctrines and philosophy that opposed Vedic religions. They engaged in rigorous proselytization of their religious ideals, and slowly the kings in the north came under the influence of these heterodox religions, the most notable among them being Chandragupta Maurya and Emperor Ashoka. Starting from their time, Buddhism and Jainism made inroads into the south of peninsular India. Now, having lost their influence in the king's court, the Vedic priesthood was looking for new pastures and were driven south of the Deccan. By the turn of the Common Era or a little earlier, they had entered Tamil country with their fair complexion and what probably sounded as an exotic tongue, that is Sanskrit. The incoming Vedic priesthood lured the Tamil kings. They reinvented heavenly lineages for the powerful Moovendar, who were now endowed with Kshatriya status and identified with lunar and solar dynasties. This probably sounded ethereal to the hitherto tribal rulers of this Dravidian stock. And this the Vedic Brahmins did, as their religious norms allowed them to perform the Homa rituals only for those belonging to the Kshatriya caste. And what they promised to deliver through these rituals was nothing short of magic. Lo and behold, by pouring oblations into a fire pit, they could help a king vanquish his enemies and become a supreme overlord. The Rajasuya Yaga and the Ashwamedha Yaga, to name a few. In effect, they came between the king and the humble bard, the Panan, eventually replacing the bards in the king's court. The famed historian from Calicut University, M.G.S. Narayanan, named this as the wedge theory, and this marked the beginning of the end. Now, we have seen in several poems of how the kings presented the bards with gifts of gold and precious stones, elephants and chariots, but never were they gifted with land. The bards' lifestyle being nomadic in nature, they had no use for lands. But with the Vedic Brahmin, it was different. Their religion dictated that they should not till the soil, as that was the work of the lower caste Sudras. So they brought in the practice of Brahmadeyam and convinced the kings to gift them with agricultural lands for the services that they rendered to the king. Brahmadeyam, which literally meant the land of Devas, were gifts of fertile agricultural lands that were made, together with the people tilling them as slaves, handed over to Brahmin priests. Now, Tamil culture had respected and honored the farmers. It was the influence of this ancient culture that led Valluvar to render 10 aphorisms under the head Ulavu, that is agriculture, in his Tirukkural. Uludundu Valvare Valvar Mattellam Toludundu Pin Selvabar. Only those who took to tilling the soil were true leaders, and the rest had to simply follow. Such was the revered status of farmers during the Sangam period. So this was a major shift, and here M.G.S. Narayanan writes, and I quote, "The story of the Brahmin is the story of an honored guest confiscating the household and its wealth and assuming the ownership of the establishment after enslaving the inmate, embodied in the beautiful myth of the Vamana, an avatar of Vishnu, in the guise of a Brahmin boy, and begging for 3 feet of the earth from the Asura king Mahabali, ultimately sending him to the netherworld of Padala. Iftipanan was a member of a vanishing species, a relic of the old tribal society of Tamilagam. The Brahmin priest held the key to the future. M.G.S. Narayanan suggests a Brahmin chieftain alliance against the peasants, which gave the proprietorship of great landed estates to the Brahmin immigrants in return for their services and blessings. Now, to have their lands confiscated and handed over to the Vedic priests and the peasants' position itself in the social hierarchy being downgraded to the lowest level would not have gone down well with the common people. The king getting alienated in the process. An insatiable hunger for more lands led to the Movendar usurping the lands of the chieftains, with a drastic consequence that they lost the support of these military rulers, paving the way for their own downfall. The wars weakening the state paved the way for the entry of new powers from the immediate north, the Kalabars of the Kannada region, followed by the Pallavas from the Telugu regions. Rajan Gurukal writes of how social chaos descended onto Tamilagam towards the end of the 3rd century Common Era, and how the predatory marches of the Kalabara rulers accentuated the culmination process of the old rule making way for a new regime. A regime that seemingly had evil effects on the Brahmanas, whose hardships of the days have gone down as the memories of the Kali Yugam, the Kali Age, in the copper plates of the 8th and 9th centuries, he points out. We will see more about the social upheavals that led to the rule of the Kalabras in the Tamil country in the coming episodes. Vanakkam.